Happy Friday and welcome to My Truth, Your Truth, Somebody's Truth. I'm Tammy Harlib, aka Reutman, and I am with...
Christopher Blakesley. Thanks for having us.
Yes, well, you're always here.
No, but you're having me.
I know, I am
appreciate
having
you letting me on the
It's
show.
almost like having a child. And today's show is sponsored by Dannius Dynamics, the world-renowned, well, it's kind of an exaggeration.
You're world
but
renowned.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
guess in
Come
my
on.
own mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for group and individual hypnotherapy.
And I'm Christopher Blakesley with LBC Law Group. We are lawyers, but different. And today we're really excited because we have the Honorable Judge Voy, William O. Voy. And I had the pleasure of introducing him. Thank you so much for being here, first
thank
of
you.
all. And I don't want to take up the entirety of the interview going over your resume because it is lengthy and impressive.
How many pages was that anyways?
I mean, I've got so many.
single
Because
space,
I
that's all.
looked at it and it just kept scrolling
I'm
and
telling you.
scrolling
Well, and
and
it's all-
scrolling and scrolling.
You know, and some people just fill them up, but his is very impressive. And so I do want to get into it a little bit. So he started off, I know he grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and he went to law school at Willamette University.
Correct.
Shortly after that, you had multiple jobs, and we're going to get into some of that during the episode, so I don't want to do a spoiler already. But I'm going to fast forward a little bit to 1998 when you were appointed as the judge, district court judge here in Nevada by the governor. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And during that time, you did first 5 years with domestic family law stuff. And then after that, you kind of transitioned a little bit into some juvenile work and helping the youth of Nevada, specifically Clark County, and working with them on delinquency issues, truancy.
Little commitments. Yes.
There we go. And in 2005, you established the nation's first specialty court for sexually exploited youth. You also were integral in keeping kids in school, specifically through the Keeping Kids in School Summit, as well as part of the Truancy Diversion Program. And from being an attorney also, and watching you actually work before we knew each other, I can honestly say that you were heavily invested in consistently seeing the good in the youth of Clark County and doing your best to focus on rehabilitation as well as punishment when required. But I think you struck a really nice balance. And what I'd like to do today is emphasize that, highlight that, commend you for your service there. And after 24 years, you finally retired, I think it was May of 2022?
Yes. So yeah. May 31st. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And since then, you're still involved with the Judicial District Court, but now you're a senior judge. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. It's through the Supreme Court.
Okay.
So when you retire, you can they drag you back.
When
And,
you retire with your resume, right? When you
Right.
retire and they're very happy with your 24 years, I'm sure they do.
Sure.
And so when you're doing senior judge work, what types of cases are you hearing now?
Well, essentially anything wherever the need is. I mean, we've got a very large district court bench here in Clark County now, and so that means there's issues happen.
Right.
Illnesses, mandatory education, all kinds of things, right? So the senior judges program that the Supreme Court developed many years ago now is kind of morphed into a pretty steady program, and a lot of it involves settlements. So in the civil cases, a lot of settlement, the active settlement judges. Right now, pretty much I'm covering most family law judges. So I'm doing the abuse and neglect cases, some of the juvenile delinquency stuff, guardianship, regular civil domestics. I mean, wherever the need is, they kind of
Well,
push
and
in
after
there.
25 years on the bench, you have the skill set and experience to kind of put a different hat on each day, right? And they definitely need that here. I know domestic law are pretty hefty waters to navigate, and so
You're a challenge.
they definitely are.
Yeah.
And a lot of emotion and frustration and anger and everything in between. And I'm involved with I'm a cap attorney as well.
So you're doing
And so I'm aware of some of those and all the good work that you're doing with this, specifically the neglect and abuse cases.
I appreciate that.
And so you're still heavily involved here in Clark County as a judge. And you also happen to know my co-host for some time. And so you have a friendship with her. I'm sure she's blessed by that. I'm not so sure you are.
Never.
And so how do you two know each other?
Well, I think we met through just doing some work together, and also my late husband did a lot of work for the juvenile court.
Awesome.
And so,
Well, let's be honest. What it really was I used Norton Reutemann for a lot of evaluations. He was one of those doctors that I always give him a hard time because I said, you write your evaluations like a psychologist. It can be 25 pages about esoteric recommendations and things of that nature from a psychiatrist. You just don't see that. So when we had tough cases where we couldn't figure out what's really going on, a lot of times we would bring Dr. Reutemann in to evaluate the situation. He'd give us a totally different take on what was going on. And I think what happened was it was my spouse. We went to a dinner. I get professionally, go to dinner once in a while. My spouse and Tammy met at dinner, and then they formed a friendship. And so that really was the connection there.
There we go.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I don't have any
Yeah.
no responsibility over here. No.
no,
It's all my wife's fault.
Definitely not. Exactly. And then, his wife and I became close friends, and unfortunately, that meant that I had to interact with him more.
Yeah.
But hey, I
life is tough.
mean,
Well, and here we all.
You get something amazing, you take the rest of
There
it.
you go.
You know
There
what
you
I'm
go.
saying? So,
And, and we're full circle here. And the reason why we wanted you to be here with us today, and again, thank you for
Pleasure.
taking the time. I've always been really impressed with people that whether through their actual profession or through their volunteer work, like Tammy does a lot of volunteer work with the youth. It's also been her job. It's been your job to help the youth in this county when they are when they make a poor decision, as we often do when we are young. But I'm curious as to how you, after 10 years of private practice as an attorney, and then being in domestic law, how did you end up making the transition to juvenile court, and what was the impetus behind that?
It's an interesting little story because after about 4 or 5 years of practicing, like when I was in the military for 3 as a JAG, came out, started solo practice, starved to death the first 5 years trying to make it. And then I realized I was in too much conflict with my own clients. I had a lot of business clients and other people like that, and I felt gravitated towards the judicial side of things rather than the advocacy side of things. And so I started doing part-time pro tem work in justice court, and I also then in '94 took over the civil commitments for Clark County in '94 when Stu Bell, who had the job before I did, became our district attorney.
And could I
yeah.
just ask for a clarification on that, just for our audience?
Sure.
What exactly would be a civil commitment?
Okay, so someone presents as a danger to themselves or others due to mental illness. They can be picked up, brought in for an examination. Doctors can clear them and they're released on a hold, or they can keep them, and then you start the court process. With in 5 days, you have to have a formal petition filed. There's a review. They're represented by counsel. It's a formal hearing, the whole 9 yards. And those civil commitments in Nevada can last up to 6 months at a time, be renewed. Most of those commitments, overwhelming majority of those commitments, when they do happen, are very short periods of time because the treating doctor, can actually release the patient, even after the court has committed the patient, can actually release the patient, which is rare in the judicial world. You just have to go back to court to get the order, right?
Right.
But the way the statute works is the professionals making those calls with judicial oversight are the ones better in position to do that, right? I mean, we're judges, we're trained as lawyers, we're not trained as mental health professionals, so we rely heavily upon them. And so doing the civil commitments, I was able to take some of my experience in dealing with mental health when I was in the military and really hone those skills. And it's fascinating because doing those calendars with those patients, especially when they come in psychotic and not stabilized yet, it can be very difficult. And you have to kind of keep things very copacetic, calm, and you really hone your skills in dealing with unstable people, which is a good experience and background for doing a full domestic calendar when these folks come into court because they're at the worst point in their lives, right? And you're dealing with all that. And so I did that for about 4 to 5 years. But at that point in time, we used to rotate every 3 years who would hear the juvenile calendars, juvenile justice calendar, and also the dependency, abuse, and neglect calendars. But in 2003, it was becoming established practice, best practices for judges to take those positions to be there for an indefinite period of time, or at least a minimum of 6 years, because just the knowledge set that you have to learn to be able to do the job well. And so what would happen was every 3 years, a new judge comes in. Well, when you're the judge of the juvenile court, that doesn't mean you're just your court itself. You also oversee, even though there's a split here in Clark County, you're also overseeing the Department of Juvenile Services too, because they're your partner in the statute that creates the juvenile court. They don't differentiate between the judge and the juvenile services.
Right.
We're all lumped together. So it's really a marriage between the judiciary and here in Nevada, the county. Because outside of Clark County, it's the traditional model where your juvenile probation officers and juvenile services folks fall under the court, just like the court clerks would, and they answer directly to the judge. That's about half the jurisdictions throughout the country. That's the traditional model.
Right.
Here in Nevada, back in '94, they split it off. The executive branch controls probation, our juvenile detention, our Spring Mountain Youth Camp for boys up in Clark County, things like that. And so that becomes this marriage where we have to be working together to make it all come out and work properly for the benefit of the community, for public safety, and for what's best interest of the child. It's a very unique situation you're in because you've got to balance both public safety and best interest of the child in these cases. And that's, sometimes they come to loggerheads, right? And that decision is tough to make. And so that's the uniqueness. But when I took over in '03, it became well established that that judge should probably stay there for a while. So I stayed there since the end of '03 until 2020, when our calendars were split with another judge, because I was the sole judge over all of juvenile delinquency.
So
that
for
many
17 years,
Yeah.
you were that judge.
That was it. Yeah, and that involves both just the courtroom, but outside of the courtroom. Half that job, to do it right, involves being outside the courtroom, interfacing with all the partners. And we're talking not just juvenile services, but we're talking about school districts, our nonprofits, every folks out there that touch kids. You have to be involved with to some extent, right? Some more than others. And so that job can only be done when you've got enough time outside the courtroom to do the other half of it. And so for 2 years, and this is during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, we switched the calendar. I had another judge come on board. We split the calendars up, and then in 22, right? Yeah. In May of 22, I decided to leave the bench with the idea that I wanted to get out from underneath that cloak of the bench and actually try to bring to fruition several projects that we'd been working on for years but never could get off the ground. And that was kind of one of my goals of leaving, is to be able to spend time doing that.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
when you're passionate like you are, right? You do go the extra mile for the kids, for the families, even for the system, which tends to be a little hard to do. I'm going to pull you back to the civil commitments because one of our viewers on Twitter, Joy Goldman, had a question about the 5150s. And so can you kind of explain,
5150s?
yeah, the
Oh, that's
legal
the
2000s.
That's the legal 2000s
Yeah,
in
yeah.
California. They call it 5150s.
Right,
Oh,
right,
okay.
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I want to pull you back on that in terms of not just the adults, but also the kids, because I think some people don't understand when you're on a hold like that, especially for kids, your parental rights are taken away, and so to be more cautious in doing them. But I'll let you explain, what it is and the process of it.
So you're talking about when you have let's say, law enforcement encounters a 16-year-old who's obviously not there, for whatever reason's going on, right? And it could be mental health, it could be under the influence, or a combination of both. You don't know on the street, but you have probable cause to believe this kid's a danger to themselves or others, and they bring them into protective custody on the legal hold, take them to the hospital, clear it medically to determine. And the medical clearance in those cases is really basically just to rule out some medical reason as to why you're acting the way you are. For example, extreme dehydration can cause psychosis, right?
Yeah.
Well, we don't know if there's a medical reason why you're exhibiting all this, right? And so that's what that medical clearance is supposed to accomplish. So at that stage in the game, then the parents would be brought in saying, well, you're willing, your child needs to be for stabilization at one of our mental health facilities, a week or two, or whatever that looks like, right? Will you voluntarily sign your child in? 90% of the time, or even more, it's just off the top of my head, don't quote that number.
Won't quote
I haven't
you.
done the research exactly, but being
the vast
being involved for
majority.
so long, I can tell you, the vast majority of them, the parents are saying, yes, Johnny needs to stay for a while and get stabilized, right? Or at least get him through the detox portion too, to see what may be left out of that once they're detoxed. When you have the parent that refuses it, and you've got these doctors saying, no, he needs to be in, that's when the court process starts, a petition's filed, and then they come to court, and then the two reviewing doctors will review the case themselves, and they work under the court, so they're independent doctors. And at those hearings, you've got the two independent doctors' recommendations and the treating doctor's recommendations. The child's represented by counsel. Parents can have their own counsel if they wish. And they're obviously at those hearings themselves and have a voice at those hearings. And usually there's, what I've seen over the years, we're able to kind of finesse it a little bit and get the parents on board cooperation-wise, but if they still refuse, then CPS gets involved.
Right.
And if they still want, and especially if the kid's needs to stay and they're trying to sign the child out involuntarily, CPS will get involved, and to go from there.
And CPS can get involved right from the beginning.
Yes,
Because I
a lot
spent
of them
many and many hours in the ER with kids, and the parent is just not willing to come down, or there's a problem with the parent
Right.
that got the kid into the ER in the first place, and then you have to call CPS, and they send a CPS worker down that kind of interacts as the parent.
And some of the parents, let's be honest, some of the parents have their own issues, right? And so you're dealing with a parent that may have their own substantial mental health issues. They're not, they're not quite focusing on what really is in this child's best interest right there,
and
right?
that's what I was going to kind of bring up, is so much of our own behaviors or patterns that we saw from our parents, and that could lead into the similar substance abuse or
And the hereditary factors of mental health.
and that's what I was
right?
going to get to,
Yeah.
right? Is then the other side is the hereditary, if they inherited it from their parents. And I can't help but think how heavy must hang the head, right? When you're having to wear that judge's robe to make these vital decisions for minors. And sometimes maybe it's made easier by the parents, and sometimes it sounds like it's made even more difficult. And I'm wondering, do you think that's something you learn from experience and that's why they wanted you to be there for 17 straight years? Is that from your background in the Army, from education? How did you kind of arrive
From
to be
your
able
own
to get there?
experiences,
Yeah.
which we know, often
Absolutely,
sets
you're right.
the stepping stones for what we're going to be amazing at.
Exactly.
I think
Tim.
it's a combination of being in there at the right time in the right place. When again, it was being acknowledged that position should stay indefinite at the time I came on board, and when I took the position, kind of on a lark, and the judges would elect every 3 years, right? And it just kind of fell in my lap, and I said, okay, I'll do it. I had no preconceived notion of juvenile justice or anything like that, or no real substantial experience in juvenile justice, other than maybe representing some kids back when I was in private practice, right? And I just fell into it, and about 6 months into that job, I realized this is what I was meant to do professionally. I've always felt lucky that I was able to find a job in a profession that I obviously could give back to my community, but more importantly, from a personal standpoint, that I enjoyed doing. Did I enjoy locking kids up? No, that's not the issue. It's a matter of feeling like you're actually helping, and in there you can do it. We're a unique area of the law. I mean, you do criminal defense work, let's say, right? And okay, I got him off on, he's only going to do 5 years, right, or whatever. And then the case goes on, and you never see the person again. The judge never sees the person again. Well, in juvenile justice, you can actually see change occur in these kids over the time you have them come in. And establishing those relationships is very key to that. For example, if you had a kid, I just had a kid I was covering in my old calendar from over a year ago, and I had a young lady on, and she was getting ready to terminate her probation finally, parole, after so many years. And when she realized I was on the case, she was just fell over herself, because I had established that rapport with her over the years. And that's so important with these kids, about these relationships with the people, with their probation officer, with their attorneys, but more importantly, their judge, because sometimes this is the only person sometimes in a position of authority that doesn't want anything from that child but to do well. Right. And so you take on more of a paternalistic role, but you have to know when to do the hammer. It's tough when you've got a kid you've been working with for a year or two, and you've seen them probably at least a dozen times in court, interacted with them, and then they're in front of you on a case where they're seeking certification. Transfer that case to the adult system, right? And it's a tough call, but just as a parent, you have to make those tough decisions. And if it follows the criteria or whatever, then you've got to make that decision. I had a kid I ran into a kid years ago who walked up to me at a toy drive we were doing at one of the Boys and Girls Clubs one night. He walked up, and he had all the tattoos and the gang-related tattoos on his face and everything. And he walks up, he goes, "Hey, Judge Boy, how you doing?" Shake my hand. I'm like, "Hey, you remember me? I'm such and such." And I'm like going, whoa, that name sounds familiar, because dealing with so many kids, I see you, I an instant recall, right? But the name itself,
Right.
It stuck in my head. He goes, "I want to thank you." I said, "Well, okay. Thank you for sending me to prison." I'm like, "Okay." He goes, because I'm doing well now. I went to High Desert for a couple of years. I got a little family now. I got a job. He goes, "But when you did that certification, that transfer case, I watched you. You didn't want to do it, but you had to do it. And I'm telling you now, it was the right call, because I was not ready. I needed that time in the adult system for a couple of years, and sometimes that happens with kids. The light doesn't turn on yet, to make a difference, because I was going to reoffend. If I'd stayed in the juvenile system, I was going to reoffend. And that's always stuck with me. It's like, really?
It's kind of like amazing insight that someone has. It says, you have to make decisions on whether to put a kid into one of the placement programs opposed to keeping them out and setting them up with services. So we have Caliente Youth Center, we have Elko, we have Summit View, and we have Spring Mountain up at the mountain.
Right.
So what is the decisions that you have to make to decide which placement is going to be the best placement for the child?
Unfortunately, we don't have a girls program close, right? So Caliente is the only place that could take girls. With boys, though, we've got those other options. Spring Mountain Youth Camp, it sits there on top of Mount Charleston, 8,000 some feet. It's one of the most unique juvenile justice facilities in the country, and I've toured a lot over the years. And it's unique because it's an open campus. You can run off from there, usually not very successfully, but you can take off. There's no fences and bars or nothing.
There are mountain lions.
There are mountain lions, yes. And we
And
have pictures of them.
cougars.
That's enough to deter me.
Yeah,
I'm
and
staying put.
And mountain lions. We got
exactly.
pictures of them, too.
Yeah.
They're waiting for you.
Yeah,
You gotta
exactly.
run
Right
off.
by the door, right?
Yeah, right by the door.
Drooling.
Yeah.
Come on.
But so my first inclination was, and why it's so unique is they're so close. It takes you a half hour to get up the mountain. Most facilities like that, like at Caliente and Elko, they're out in the middle of well, not so much Elko, but Caliente in the middle of nowhere. So if you can have an open campus, and that's the traditional model of juvenile justice, out in the middle of nowhere, open campus, reform schools, whatever they called them back in the day, because there was no place to run, which is good because we don't want them institutionalized in a prison type setting, right? More of like a boarding school type setting, right?
Right.
And so what makes Spring Mountain so unique is that we can get everyone up there. We can get family up there to visit, professionals to go up there to do their work. The probation officers aren't living there, they come and go. And it's so unique of a facility. That's always been my first go-to, always, because of that. And keeping the families engaged more that way, because you send a kid to Elko, let's be real. A lot of these families, there's no way they're getting Elko to visit. So they're up there for 9 months, no visitation, maybe some phone calls and things like that, right? And then they do their program. Maybe they do very well. We plop them back down here and back into Las Vegas. They go right back home, right back to the same neighborhood, and then we wonder why they reoffend. And that's one of the things that we were working on prior to the shutdown, was really that family engagement piece and getting those families more involved in the transition and more transition services in place, so these kids don't have to go right back in there, because once they know Johnny's home, they start knocking on the door, right? And next thing you know, Johnny's back out on the street. And, it's not a good situation.
Of course, of course, correct me if I'm interpreting it incorrectly, but it sounds like so
You
much. Thank goodness.
And so will I.
Good, please do. Hold me accountable. But it sounds so much like a lot of what you're trying to do, even when there has to be, as you described it, a hammer, right? Somebody needs to learn their lesson. But so much of what you're trying to do is, rather than make it punitive, make it also rehabilitative.
Of course.
And by not institutionalizing them, right, where they're in a jail cell with these bars and they're isolated and there's chain link and barbed wire, you're making it accessible to families and having some of these other mental health benefits. Am I reading that right?
No, that's right. I mean, the mental health aspect, the rule of thumb is at least 70% of the kids that we deal with have mental health issues, from anywhere from extreme, let's say, schizophrenic, to adjustment disorders and everything else in between, right? And so mental health is a huge portion of the programming that we do in juvenile justice, because it exists. We have to deal with it, right? But the more important thing is the consequences. What people don't understand, because you see people in the press or other politicians talk about these kids need to be punished and lock them up, and okay, fine, I get that aspect of it, but consequences are really what we're looking at. And consequences can be lots of different things and means different things to different kids, right? You may have that one kid gets arrested for the first time, spends 48 hours in juvie, you'll never see that kid again, all right? That you got a kid that spends a couple weeks in juvie, they get acclimated to it.
They meet new friends.
And make new friends.
They learn new skills.
All right, and they get out, and then we got bigger problems. But the acclimation to the detention environment is really important, because it now take that deterrent value that detention may have had, it's gone. Right. It's gone. I did juvie. It's no big deal, right?
Right.
I've had kids tell me later on in life, I was covering a domestic calendar the other day, and a guy was in front of me, and he goes, "Judge, I was in front of you when I was a kid, blah, blah, blah." He goes, "Do me a favor." He goes, "When you're talking to them, remind them this is juvie. This isn't the criminal system. I did my 2 years in the criminal system. I wish I had known what it was like, because when I did it, I thought it was just going to be like juvie again, right?" I'm like,
that's
no,
really interesting.
Not
yeah,
so much.
and not so much, right? But consequences can be anything. So what we like to say in the juvenile justice world is that we do rehabilitation, we do accountability and consequences. We're not here, you could call it punishment if you want, but it's more consequences, because you can have pro-social activities that are consequential to a kid. And they're getting not just, okay, I'm doing this, it's paid back for doing the crime. And that's simplistic way of looking at it. But also, these are the consequences I have to do, but I'm actually getting something out of it. And maybe I'm not going to be in that same mindset 6 months later after going through whatever that program is than I was before I went into it. And so that's why I like to focus on that, because everyone wants to say punishment, just like they're saying that what the school district was doing with restorative justice and a school to justice partnership that we as juvenile justice approached Clark County School District back in 2018 with. And they're blaming the issues we're having now in school on that. And that is so narrow-sighted and ignorant, and I'll tell you why. We never got the program started.
Right.
We spent 2 years trying to get this huge school district to get the proper personnel in place, the training in place with the number of employees they have. We're talking, we had a program to train every employee, not teachers, janitors, bus drivers, everyone on this idea of there must be consequences, but consequences doesn't mean that you automatically send the kid to juvie. Because I'm telling you, this is how it works. You have a kid that is pulled out of class for doing something in class, they make a referral to the district attorney's office, they file a petition. 4 weeks later, the way that works its way through the system, right?
Right.
Kids need immediate consequences. You can't consequent a kid for something, oh, last year you did that. Here, come
Right.
over here. Boom, hit you upside the head. It
Right.
doesn't work, right?
Right.
It has to be immediate. Because kids, that's how their thought process is, right? And the further delay you get from the time whatever happened to the consequence portion, the longer that takes, the more meaningless
The
the
less they
consequence.
associate the two,
and,
right?
And I want to jump
Exactly.
in because you bring up the school district, and you know when I graduated, yeah, I know it's hard to believe, but I did, with my EDS. My professional paper was actually on school failure and its contributions to juvenile delinquency. And I think what people kind of miss is that the child is usually acting out because there usually is an academic deficit that is unaddressed. And even if they're in special ed, they're on 504s, they're on IEPs, a lot of times those issues still aren't addressed.
Right.
So the kid, you know, for kids, they're in school for the majority of the day, of the week, and of the year. And it's their one place where they can start to feel accomplishment or feeling good about themselves or, you know, feeling like they have succeeded in something. But when you don't succeed there, you're going to go outside and look for a place you do succeed. So you go to the store, you steal a candy bar, you get away with it, you feel that internal sense of success. And human nature is really to go where one succeeds, not where one fails. And I wish that the juvenile system and the school district would work much closer in looking at the academic deficits and how they are creating a child to go outside and feel a successful accomplishment somewhere else.
Well,
So,
Nice.
you know,
No, that's a very good point, Tammy. It's very good. I was gonna add though, what I read and hear out there, what concerns me is when we went down this road, 2018. Let's set it straight. You put hands on a staff member or teacher, you're going to juvie. All right, that was not. You're disruptive in class. Our system that we were trying to implement, remove that kid from the class, but put that child with someone at that school, not taking the kid out of that school, the classroom, yes, not the school. Because let's think back not that long ago when I was in school. When you acted up in school and
Wait.
were a jerk,
that's
yeah, I went to school, yeah.
Much
Well,
longer.
I know we had
way
we had buggies,
longer.
you know,
exactly,
horses
and I
and
know
stuff.
walk 10 miles in the snow.
I know we didn't have shoes either.
Uphill both
but my
ways.
point is, we had we had it down where we wanted those cases that could be managed and kept within the school to stay there and not come to our system. But we also recognized that the school system needed to have all the resources in place. And that's what we were in the process of putting in place when the shutdown finally put an end to everything in March 2020. So it was never implemented. And again, like I said, we were trying to get school-based behavior. Assaulting someone's not school-based behavior.
Right.
Telling your teacher to F off or whatever, okay, that's school-based behavior. We should be able to deal with that the old way, because like back in the day, we had Saturday detention. We went to the dean's office. We had to sit there, and I remember I had to sit through an entire day's worth of class when in the dean's office with my books by myself because of something I did in class.
Right. You're
But
off
our
the football
system-
team. You're off the basketball
Right.
team.
But
You
our
can't do
sys-
it.
But our system became
Punitive.
well, not punitive, but our system became dependent upon, let's get rid of that kid, send him to the juvenile system.
Right.
Send him to the juvenile system. They'll take care of it. They'll take care of it. And then when you explain to folks that that's the hurdles that the system has and the time constraints to get that kid from the event to consequences or intervention or whatever needs to happen, was taking, and again, it's a process, unfortunately, that would take a month and a half. And by then, the school districts got the kid back in that same class again with no consequences
Right.
and no intervention.
And
So-
and too much time in between for it to have actually made a difference for him, right?
They've lost
and,
track
and
of it.
so much of what you're describing almost sounds like, hey, this ain't my problem. Y'all take care of it.
Send them down.
They're almost dismissive of these kids at a time
Like-
when they're so impressionable that's going to leave a lasting effect, right? I'm not worthy of being here. I'm not worth their time.
I mean, isn't that the problem in general in society, that we don't take care of people? Even in the mental health system, we're too busy categorizing instead of stopping and saying, hey, what's wrong with this particular person? What does this particular person need? If you look at everything, how can we intervene to help the success of this person move forward? And we don't do that in almost any aspect, which is really a shame.
And that's the difference. And that's, I guess, one of the things that always guided me was I have each kid in front of me, and and each kid's individual. Each kid needs something different. There's no cookie cutters. There's no, here,
That's
go to
right.
this program, go to that program. No, let's sit and talk and let's find out what's going on.
Yes.
And we'll think outside the box or do whatever necessary. Unfortunately, the judicial system is not really good at doing that. It's gotten better, I tell you. I mean, with all the specialty courts and all that we have nowadays, it's gotten better. But traditionally, the judicial way of doing things isn't geared towards having
the
that
individual.
Right.
yeah,
that
the individual
individual
attention.
stuff,
Let's
right.
talk about this. What's going on? Why do we need? And do you really need to do this? Because the standard rule is you got to do this. Let's see,
This
you got to do.
protocol, right.
Yeah, you got to do your 50 hours community service
Yeah,
over
yeah,
here, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But for this kid, maybe this over here might be the best way to handle the situation. And
Yeah.
that's-
So giving the judge, the staff, a little bit of autonomy to vary from the SOP, right?
Yeah.
The standard operating procedure, if it's going to fit this kid in a better situation.
You have
Is
to-
that what you're kind of both
Yep.
talking
Yeah,
about?
you have
Is-
to step outside of a box.
Yeah.
You have to
Well, what's-
look at the kid like
What's preventing us from doing
individual.
that? Is it lack of training? Is it lack
It's
of
a
time,
lack of
funding?
collaboration, and
Yeah.
A lot of
the way
lack of-
I see it is people just don't come together in a solid system to work not just with the kid, but the family. A lot of times needs the help as well. I mean, a lot of times I know with kids in the juvenile system or kids having a hard time in school, there's a lack of basic needs in the family, but nobody's really addressing those. So if you're feeling insecure because you don't have food, you can't pay your rent, or kids don't have clothes, you don't have a job, or you do have, I've known parents that have 2 and 3 jobs and still can't make enough to support their families, then,
What do you care if Johnny's talking in class, right? There's a
well-
hierarchy of needs, and if the main ones are not getting met, how are you going to worry about some of these that somebody else is paid to take care
Well,
of, right? Teacher can put them
But
in
not
detention.
only that, I mean, I was pulled into a lot of very high-profile and difficult cases, and one of the things that I realized is everybody's too busy telling these parents how bad their kid is. They already know that their kid has a problem, but they're doing almost nothing to help them. So our show is about taking the fear out of situations that people would come up through day to day, and I felt when I asked Judge Boyd to come on that one of the bigger issues is, how how can we take the fear out of a parent that's going to come head to head with a juvenile system? So if you can help us understand maybe quickly the process of it and how a parent can calm themselves down and interact with the system in a more collaborative, peaceful way. I know it was a whole mouthful.
It's a big
That's
question.
a tough one.
That's a big question.
And it has to be handled individually, and that depends. And quite frankly, that's again, we talked about the court, the judge establishing relationships with those kids in that context. It's just as important to try to establish a connection with that parent or guardian that you're dealing with also, and get them on board. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's impossible, and then there's everything else in between. But one of the things is getting the parent buy-in, and that's that parent engagement piece that we started really starting to work on before the pandemic hit, and getting the parents more involved and more communication, explaining to the parents why we have to do X, Y, and Z. Explaining to the parent, your 14-year-old's got to do 200 hours of statutory community service, and the parent's going like, I can't find a place for him to do it. And then you have to explain to the parent, it's state law, and it says must. I, as the judge, can't do otherwise. So let's sit down for a second and focus on, okay, let's think outside the box here, what we might be able to get your kid into. And it takes a little extra time per case. One of the complaints I always had was, God, he just takes forever sometimes, or whatever, or he spends too much time on an individual case. And I go, well, you know what? I'd rather spend extra time on this case now, and hopefully prevent them from reoffending, but actually, hopefully, they're successful. But it takes some time to gather that.
It's going to take a hell of a lot more time if they're reoffending in 5 years.
And quite frankly, the big, and I'll just say this now, is the big elephant in the room in our world, in the juvenile justice world, and in our world in general, is this. Everyone wants to point fingers and blame, like I said earlier, it's blame restorative justice in the schools. That's why we have problems in schools, and so much disrespect, and also this stuff going on, right?
Never mind, that's been going on for years in
right,
our
right.
school district.
Yeah. But they want to blame that because it's an easy thing to do, right? It's not that easy, and it's very complex. We saw this coming well before 2020, and it started coming where this isolation from other peers. And my best example is this. When you're driving down the road and a driver cuts you off, you're flipping him off, you're yelling at him, calling him all his names. If you were walking down the sidewalk and the guy walked in front of you accidentally, would you do the same thing? No.
Absolutely not.
Because you're isolated in your own world, and everything is on that damn phone right here. And so that is occurring, and it drives wedges between the establishing interpersonal relationships and how to navigate those, because you got this artificial world you're in on your damn phones. And so that then, we go into 2020 and the shutdown, that just threw it off the charts.
No
and
question.
Now you've got these kids, and they're in this world of la la land. They're not communicating with each other. They're not learning how to resolve conflicts with each other early on in the maturation process, because they just text each other and piss each other off, but they never interact with each other, in person, right?
Exactly.
And if you lose that, then you lose touch with what's important in life.
Of course.
I'm gonna pull you back.
Please.
So when a child is referred to the juvenile system, is the parent given something that they can understand what the process is going to be?
Yeah, there's a little handbook they have. If
Okay.
they take it.
And is someone available for the parent to understand what's in that handbook? Maybe a parent can't read. How do
That's
they
hit and miss.
understand? Who's helping them really understand the process that they're about to walk through of course, they want what's best for their child too. So is there anything set up that's helping the parent really understand the process? What are the potentials that could happen? Anything like that?
Yeah, that usually happens face to face in the courtroom. Is
Okay.
that the best place for it? No, not necessarily. But we do have the handbook. If they read it, great. But it's a matter of engaging the parent. So you're dealing with the kid and the lawyers and all that stuff, and they're like going, "Oh, I don't know what's going on here." You guys talking in all kinds of strange language because we talk in code, right?
Of course.
even most lawyers don't even know our code to go down there, right?
absolutely
They're like, the parents, like, a puzzled look on their face, like, what's happening next? Well, you have to be willing as a judge to engage the parent and go, you got a question?
Right.
You got. Do you understand what's going on here? And you have to take that moment to engage. And that's something that happens in the court process, and it all depends on the judge or hearing masters that we have.
And
too.
also hoping that the attorney that's representing the parents and the kids will take the time after court to say, okay,
And
you know,
I've
that
had
was
to
a
do
lot.
that.
Here's
Yeah.
what happened.
I have to do that in a lot of cases and tell the lawyer, because the parent is saying, I haven't heard anything. The lawyer won't talk to me because the lawyer takes the position they represent the kid, and rightfully so. That's what they do. But you can give some basic information to the parents about what's going on,
Of course.
without divulging communication between you and the child client, right?
More of a
so-
procedural approach. Here's what we can expect. Here's
Right.
what the judge said. This is what it means.
Well,
Instead
they
of
need to do a better job of it. I agree with you.
Doesn't the parent have a right, given the fact that they are the legal guardian of the child? Or once the child is involved in the juvenile system, the state becomes the legal
No.
guardian?
No, the state only, it's, we call it, if you commit a kid to the state institution, they're, you're committed to the state for that, and you become now a ward of the state. But it's not like a ward in a guardianship ward. There's no parental rights that are taken away or held in abeyance. You still have your parental rights. However, Johnny committed a crime, and Johnny's going to go to Elko, and these are the rules that Johnny has to follow, and that's just the way it works.
Got it.
Parent.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so why Johnny's with us here at Elko? We stand in parentis locus, and on top of that, that's the job of the juvenile court judge to ensure that they are being taken care of in a humanistic way and actually receiving therapeutic services. I mean, that's a huge part of it, the mental health aspects, right?
and if we had time, I wanted to get into that, but I'm not sure.
We're-
I know, Tammy, you have some
We're-
questions.
We're running out.
We're running out. You're too interesting,
We're
Judge
out of
Boyd.
time. You're out of time. But one thing I think from everything that you said, and I've listened, I know that's a shock.
It's a first.
But to help parents out, I think one of the main things is you're getting a booklet. Read the booklet. If you can't read the booklet, ask somebody to help you with the booklet. If you can't understand it, ask as many questions so that when things advance for your child, you not only know what's going on, but knowing how to advocate for your child. Would you
Correct.
agree with that?
No, it's a good idea. And
Amazing.
so I would tell parents, first of all, take a look at it, get the handbook, engage the kids' counsel, because you can hire your own counsel if you wish, but 90% of it's either PD's office or
Right.
conflict attorneys, and they know all this. They know all the procedure and rules, what to expect, and engage them for that if you're having trouble understanding. But lastly, more importantly, when you're in court, stand up and say, "Judge, I have a question."
Have a voice.
Have a
You
voice,
have
yeah.
a voice.
And judges will usually respond. And I'm not speaking for other judges, but I always responded and tried to make sure, because the parent buy-in is piece, because we're only going to have the kid, like at Spring Mountain Youth Camp or whatever, for example, for 6 months.
Right.
They're coming back home.
Right.
So again, that parent engagement piece is so crucial,
Yeah.
so that they have a buy-in. Usually I would like to get a buy-in for a parent. You know, Johnny's going to go to Spring Mountain Youth Camp. And then the parent would either express disappointment sometimes they go with the parents on board with it. They get it, right?
Right.
Sometimes disappointment. And that's when I have to take the parent aside a little bit and say, let me explain what that is up there. Explain the facility, what it's like, what we do up there, things like that, and why Johnny has to go do this. And that most of the time brings them down. They understand, okay? He's going to come home in 6 months. I can visit him up there, but he's required to do this.
It's a finite amount of time. He's
Yeah.
coming home to you.
Yeah, and they're always going to come back home,
So-
usually.
Sounds
So-
like an opportunity for someone that has the passion in helping parents understand at least the criminal system, whether it's juvenile or their child has been moved up to the adult system, to create a program that, nonprofit perhaps, to sit down with the parent, not only explain the process, but also help the parent and the family get the services they need while their child is in incarceration, so that when the child comes back home, then the whole family is much better off, and there's more of a chance for a complete success,
Yeah.
not only for the kid, but also for the family.
And one last
And-
thing is,
Please.
until they get rid of the video system, you're not going to make any inroads here. Currently, kids are appearing in video from home, sitting on their couch,
Getting bonbons.
and or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And the parents there too, the attorneys in their office on video also, and again, it keeps that goes back to what we first started with, that disconnect that has occurred,
Yeah.
and that human interaction that is no longer there. It's such an impediment to accomplish anything.
Right.
How are you supposed to have that communication, especially when the reception's bad? It's the blue jeans
course.
system we use, and they don't get it there.
Got the dog barking in the background. Brother comes home from school.
Yeah, the internet interference, so you can't
course.
you hear every fifth word maybe or
Right.
whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The
so it's-
pandemic's pretty much over. We need to go back to the humanistic part
Yeah.
of
On
a
some
society.
of them, something this important, I think you're right,
Yeah.
and you would know better than most. And I just have to say, one of the things that I saw you light up the entire time was about the individual relationships that you developed with these kids that are in danger, and it's really impressive. And it's something that from this show that I learned, and I hope that our audience learned, is how much importance we need to place on the individual relationship,
It's
on
so
the
important.
individual, what that individual needs, what I need, and I love the stories you shared about some of the kids
we're just dealing with kids.
Yeah.
We're dealing with kids, and
well,
even though
human
kids have
beings.
create some serious crimes, I get it too, but we're still dealing with kids, and so that relation, the number of kids that come up to me in court saying when they come back again because they commit another crime, a delinquent act, they were embarrassed. They felt they're disappointed, like your father. He was
Right.
disappointed. I
if they
disappointed
didn't care
you.
about you,
Yeah.
they would not be embarrassed in front of you.
And they're like going, "I'm sorry, Judge, I disappointed you," or the joy they feel when they come back and they're terminated and going, "I'm doing great. I got my own place. I got a job," or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And they want to share that with you. That is so important.
That's what we're looking for, and that's what we can take, whether it's in court, whether it's at home, whether it's in our relationships. And I can't thank you enough for being
Pleasure.
here and
Yeah.
sharing all this with us and being vulnerable and educational. And
I think it's amazing, and I thank you personally. Might be the nicest thing I ever say to you, but hey,
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know.
That's true.
Yeah.
lucky
Yeah.
you. I haven't gotten one of those.
Hey, you haven't
yet.
got one of those yet?
Not
Yeah.
yet. Soon.
Yeah,
But
you might get
hopefully.
lucky
Yeah,
eventually.
yeah.
But I think you're an amazing person. I have a high degree of respect for you. I know what you've accomplished in your career, and I know how many, well, I don't know the exact numbers, but I know many of the kids that, because of your passion, because of your willingness, have given them opportunities to make an amazing change in their own life and be better off for it. So I thank you,
Well, thank you.
completely, and I'm so grateful that you were on our show today.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you again
you.
so much. And we usually end the show, Tammy, with a product review. And I think you have one for us, or are we just going to hop into a modality?
We're going to go into a modality, and then usually we do the product review after that, Christopher. Get with the program.
There we
man.
go. Hey, you run this part.
No.
I'm just here to watch and learn.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and learn a new technique. We've been working with the breathing for the last couple of episodes, learning how to breathe correctly in and out of the nose, learning how to slow it down, learning how to use account breathing. So I just kind of want to add on that a little bit. So what I'd like everybody to do, and please don't do this if you're driving or using heavy machinery, because as I said before, I've done that and it hasn't worked out so well. Well, at least not for cars and people
careful out
around
there.
me, but so if we could all just close our eyes, and we're not going to actually control the breath this time. I just want you to kind of watch the breath, and we're going to move the awareness through the body. And as we do that, if you find that you're holding any tension, any stresses, any emotions, even thoughts, right? Because we have to move all of this into our body. And I want you to then go ahead and take control of the breath. Take a breath into that area as your awareness is there, and then release it. Release the thought, release the tension, release the stress, release the emotion. So let's go ahead and close our eyes and just become very aware of the abdomen moving up and down for a moment. And when I say we're going to move our awareness, what that means is your eyes are closed, but it's as if they were open. And so let's go ahead and move our full attention, awareness, and focus to the top of our head. If you notice any stresses or tensions or emotions there, see in your mind's eye the breath moving into that area as you take the breath in. And as you release it, release the tension or stress or an emotion. And move our full attention, awareness, and focus to the sides of our head. Start with the right side and then the left side. and then the back of the head. Move your attention, awareness, and focus to your forehead, the right eyebrow, the left eyebrow, the right eyelid, the left eyelid, the right temple, left temple, the right cheek, left cheek, the right nostril, the left nostril, to your upper lip, upper teeth, upper gums, the roof of the mouth, your tongue, under your tongue, your lower gums, teeth, lip, your right side of your jaw, the left side of your jaw, your chin, the right ear, left ear. And remember, if there's any stresses or tensions or emotions or even a thought, go ahead and use the breath to move into that area. And as you release it, release that from the body. Move your awareness to your throat, to the right side of your neck, to the left side of your neck, to the back of the neck, to the collarbone. You know, we often don't realize how much stresses and tensions and emotions we actually put into the collarbone that end up manifesting around the other parts of the body. Your right shoulder, upper arm, elbow, lower arm, your wrist, hands and fingers, the left shoulder, upper arm, elbow, lower arm, wrist, hands and fingers. Move your awareness to your chest, the abdomen, the stomach, and all the organs in the stomach. To your upper back and spine, the shoulder blades, your middle back and spine, the lower back and spine, your hips, the groin area, your right thigh, knee, shin, calf, ankle, your right foot, your right toes, the left thigh, knee, shin, calf, ankle, foot, toes. And although this was a longer process right now, it only takes a minute, really, to close your eyes, to move your awareness around your body when you're having a sensation or a thought that's being activated in some part of the body. Like sometimes people have anxieties and their stomachs start hurting or their chest starts pounding. Literally, this takes 2 minutes to close your eyes, move your awareness to that area, use the power of the breath, and as you release it, settle that area down. You could even say, you know, I want my stomach to calm down, or I'd like my chest to become a little bit more peaceful. And it takes a half a second to be able to do that. With sleep issues, this is a good thing to do right before you go to sleep, and it will actually draw you into sleep. So I hope that tip is very, very helpful, and I hope everybody enjoys using it.
Thank you, Tammy. And I just want to emphasize that this doesn't have to be long. When you wake up in the morning, take a few moments before you start your day. Take a few deep breaths, close your eyes, collect yourself. Be more mindful of your decisions throughout the day. I think it's going to really help our listeners.
Yeah.
I know it helps me, so thank you for that.
And if it helps him, it helps anybody. Believe me, he needs a lot
I'm
of
no
help.
longer a lost cause.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, well, Tammy, looks like we're out of time. Are you going to be able to do your product review?
Yeah.
Let's
So
go ahead and hit
today
it out.
I wanted to do a product review. I became a vegetarian probably 7 or 8 months ago, and obviously did it maybe like some other people did it and just like did it. Didn't pay attention to how to do it or how to like supplement the vitamins and everything, and ended up becoming pretty anemic to the point where I just like had no energy. I had headaches, and I'm like, what's going on with me? Come to find out, like, I was anemic, so I call a friend who's a doctor and say, I'm anemic. I need to get the iron levels back up. How can I do that the fastest? And of course, they say, eat meat.
Yeah, meat.
It's going to do
Right.
it the fastest. And my energy was so low. I was feeling so not good about it. I ended up doing that for a week. I felt a lot better and said, okay, this time, now I have some knowledge on what not to do. So I think I need to put myself on a vitamin. So I looked at all the different vitamins. A lot of them were very sugary and had gumdrops, with sugar on them,
Right.
which I'm not a big sugar person. So, and they really weren't working because I was starting to feel low again. So I ended up going to Whole Foods and talking to somebody there that actually happened to be knowledgeable. So I said, I want a multivitamin. I haven't done well with vitamins in the past. What do you recommend? And she actually recommended the Vitamin Code gummies. And I wanted a gummy. But the funniest thing about this is it's actually a prenatal vitamin. But
Makes sense.
it has iron in it, right? So I'm like, okay, prenatal. Well, I'm not pregnant, but you just had a puppy. Did you use prenatal
I
vitamins?
I needed those. They saved me.
Yeah, exactly, right?
One for the dog, one
Yeah.
for you. Yeah.
Dog
Ex-
loves the sugar on them, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. So I tried them, and they don't have a bunch of sugar all over them. And I'll tell you, I've been able to stay completely vitamin efficient instead of
And
deficient.
energetic.
And energetic.
That
and,
went away.
Here, let's take this
and
away
no
from you,
issues.
Dad, 'cause
Yeah.
you should take this away. That's
She's
way
got
too
enough
much.
energy.
Yeah, you got
Yeah.
enough energy.
Take that coffee away,
So
too.
this particular product, I'm going to call no bullshit on because this was a great product and it
Fantastic.
very helpful. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Well, thank you for that review.
Well, hey, you're welcome. And
I like
hey, when you get pregnant again,
There we
There you
go,
go.
with another puppy.
Well, you're
Well, thank you again, Judge Foy.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank
Really
you so
appreciate
much.
it.
I
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
you.
Always. All right. Thank you. My pleasure. Tim.